Everyone with ADHD has executive dysfunction. So much so that it impacts their relationships, their school, their work, their day-to-day life. Not everybody who has executive dysfunction has ADHD. And so there is a term that's going around the internet and it's incorrect. It's called new onset ADHD, and they're applying it to perimenopause and menopausal women. You can absolutely have brain changes that affect your executive function. So estrogen goes down, mitochondria function goes down, inflammation goes up, and now our executive function is compromised. You can have that, but not have ADHD. If you have a good skilled clinician, they will go back through what it looked like when you were a child. What did it look like when you were a teenager? And there is likely going to be uncovering of issues that you thought were normal, that people ignored, that people told you were lazy, that they told you to suck it up, and that was ADHD. If you had ADHD as a child, but you didn't get diagnosed until 45, you've always had ADHD. If everything was going fine, okay, and I'm not talking about masking fine, compensating fine, I'm talking about like you never struggled with significant executive dysfunction that interrupted your day-to-day living, interrupted your ability to be successful in the traditional ways we define success in life, like relationships and school and all of those things. You never had issues. You never struggled with executive dysfunction. By the way, people with ADHD do get married. They have long relationships. They graduate from school. Okay, so that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that executive dysfunction made it so you had to work harder than anyone else around you who was neurotypical. If you didn't have all of that, and now you're experiencing symptoms, what you're having is a decline in estrogen that is affecting your mitochondrial function and is affecting brain inflammation. That is not new onset ADHD. That is estrogen and other hormones, but primarily estrogen affecting your prefrontal cortex where executive functions are run. Executive functions are things like how we manage our time, how we start and finish projects, how we're actually able to look at something really complex, a large project, and plan that out and say, okay, I got to reverse engineer this and figure this all out. It is how we are able to put together a grocery list, go to the grocery store, pick up all the items, not get distracted while we're there. To my ADHD people, come home, remember that you have those food, follow the recipe. Executive function is also how we're able to transition from things. So not being hyper-focused, not feeling super enraged. So, it can look a lot like ADHD, but you need to work with a clinician to rule things out. I get on the internet that diagnosing ADHD is really trendy right now, in terms of armchair experts making cute little TikTok clips. Okay, but that doesn't mean ADHD isn't real, but it also doesn't mean everything is ADHD and that you don't need to rule out other things. You can have post-traumatic stress disorder. You can have other issues going on like depression. These can happen with ADHD, by the way. You can have these comorbidities, or you might have something on its own. But the most important thing is to be holistically evaluated so that we understand, is it something else? Or is it ADHD alone? Or is it ADHD with other things? Because that is the way you get the best treatment for your brain. Now, as I go through this science, it's going to be really easy for you to understand how some doctors are missing. They're not experts in ADHD. So when you see a gynecologist who's like, I think you have ADHD, that doesn't mean it's a diagnosis. That means that you need a referral. You're going to see how it's really easy that it could be mistaken for ADHD, but also why we see such a phenomenon of women in their 40s plus getting diagnosed finally with ADHD. Because with ADHD, you already had executive dysfunction, you already had mitochondria mayhem, and you already had neuroinflammation was up, and you already had problems with brain energy production. So now we put you in perimenopause and everything just got way, way worse. Let's get into some key supplements that have clinical trials to back them that are showing big promise for brain health, for focus, for mood, for attention. And the very first one is saffron, but just not any saffron. saffron specifically. With this one, we want to aim for 30 milligrams a day. Something really cool about saffron is there have been several human trials, including saffron that I'm talking about specifically, that have shown meaningful improvement in mild depression and anxious symptoms within about 4 to 8 weeks of taking it. So what people often experience is having a steadier mood that makes tasks starting and follow through a whole lot easier, and they just feel happier. Now, if you remember in this podcast, I talked to you about neuroinflammation. So neuroinflammation can rise as estrogen declines, or as part of having ADHD, we do see that there is neuroinflammation. And so saffron has carotenoids that can act as antioxidants and immune modulators. There have been studies, some of which are on lab animals, that show a reduction in oxidative stress and inflammatory signaling. So these are some of the factors that can keep the brain in a noisy state. And so saffron may be able to contribute to a calmer biology that's supporting clearer thinking. There's also a sleep effect. So there was a saffron randomized clinical control trial that found better self-reported sleep quality. And remember, this matters because when your sleep is improved, your attention, your working memory is improved the next day. I want to talk to you about acetylcholine. Specifically, I chose Cognizin for our product, and we're looking at 250 milligrams daily for that because that supports executive function and also the speed in which your brain works. I like to think about acetylcholine like this premium membrane part for neurons. It's a really interesting molecule. So there's been human trials in healthy people that show better attention and faster psychomotor speed. And so you can think about like the start button and the mental tempo you need for planning and prioritizing is supported with this molecule. So if you are the person that has trouble getting started, keeping going on a project, Cognizin is definitely one to be looking at. The other thing about acetylcholine as it fits into this conversation of your brain remodeling through the perimenopause years is that there's been research showing that it supports the membrane turnover, so the cells that are turning over, and it helps with the signaling, specifically in the brain areas that drive executive function. So it's a really interesting one when you consider that if we see perimenopause as this brain remodeling time, to bring this in to support remodeling. It's basically like, part of giving your body the building blocks to rebuild. Now, from a mood perspective, what we look at is that potentially by stabilizing the frontal lobe and the energy there and the attention, acetylcholine may reduce the mental drag that feels kind of overwhelming. And that is something that is often felt as low mood in perimenopause. So with acetylcholine, the mood trials are limited, but what we want to think about primarily is that it helps with cognitive support, which may help your mood feel lighter. And that's why it's a really great molecule to be partnering with saffron, which we know does have great research supporting its mood effects. Now, with Bacopa, if you have ADHD, you probably heard about Bacopa because it's like one that like ADHD brains love. With this particular form of Bacopa, we're looking at 300 milligrams a day, especially when we're wanting to support memory and calm focus, not like amped up focus, but calm focus. So Bacopa works like a bit of a memory trainer. There's been interesting randomized control trials with the particular form of Bacopa that we're using that show improvements in new memory formation, in subjective stress and anxiety. Bacopa shows promise for supporting memory learning, recall, staying on task, so executive functions again. It's also been looked at for brain inflammation and brain health overall. Bacopa has antioxidant and anti-inflammatory actions that may help protect the synapses in the brain. So that is something that could be really useful when hormonal fluctuations are happening and your networks are retuning, rewiring, you're going through that system update. Bacopa may, in fact, help with that. As always, Thank you so much for being here. If you want to grab the Radiant Mind, POD 15 gets you 15% off. And for a limited time, we're throwing in the Magnesium Plus as a thank you for trusting in me and my team to bring you the best quality supplements. Always third-party tested, always screened, and always making sure that we are using the highest quality, sustainable ingredients manufactured in the United States. Until next time, take care of your hormones and they will take care of you. If you enjoyed this conversation, then I definitely want you to check out this.